My name is Acacia Berry. I am from Archeological Analytics. If you are watching this is a re-record of the original video that was done last Thursday, September 21st, I believe. We had a lot of technical issues, so this is a re-record with fewer issues. And I'm going to set up and then start the process. So give me a minute. Okay, so let's start. Once again, my name is Acacia Berry, founder and CEO of Arc Analytics. You probably won't see me from here on out, but you'll hear my voice. And what I'm going to do is talk about all kinds of ways in which one can do digital humanities using various formats. But let me give you a little background about the company, and we'll lead into the presentation. What you're looking at is a few examples of what you'll see later on. So just enjoy the little slideshow while I give you this mini intro. Okay, so Arc Analytics is a digital marketing firm specializing in the humanities, specifically with institutions that have collections. The company was created to bridge the gap between what I like to call the producers of information, meaning people like us, academics, writers, authors, researchers, and the consumers of information, which is what I love to call regular people, the public. The whole point is to try to make sure that anything that we produce actually gets to the public. Oftentimes we produce things and they get stuck behind paywalls, still in our computer folders, as dissertations in libraries. And by using, the digital sphere, we can get these things out of, where they're usually hidden and into, people's lives. So I want to use this opportunity to talk about how to do that and to talk about the difference between what academics are used to doing in terms of publishing their work versus what the digital sphere kind of requires. And more importantly, what people expect in the digital sphere and how we can meet them halfway or even 90% of the way in some cases, okay? So let's get started. The other thing I want to bring up before we continue is, please use this time to just listen and watch and absorb. You could take notes, but anything that you do that is digital is instinctive. And so I'm trying to build that from, this audience, is how to just see things and know if they are of quality or if they need to be fixed, kind of thing. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, first thing to question, what is digital content? So we're going to be talking about 3 different types of digital content: websites, social media, and what is now being called Web 3.0. Web 3.0 is, if you've probably heard, things having to do with NFTs and AR, VR. It's called it's called Web 3.0 because we consider Web 2.0 as the internet plus social media, and Web 1.0 as the internet before social media. So obviously the first era was prior to, let's just say 2004, if you will, because I think that's when Facebook really kind of gained prominence. And then we currently are in the age of social media, but probably within the next year or so, you'll start to see more and more Web.3 elements. We will be talking about all 3 of these versions today. some things that are in development, so that you also know what's coming down the pipeline in the future. Okay? All right. So the first section we're going to focus on is what makes a good website. And I want to point out the order in which you see these words: information, visual, and direction. In terms of a website, information is the most important part of a website, then visuals, and then direction. Another term for direction is UX, otherwise known as user experience. And user experience is all about how do we tell people where to go next. If you've ever used a website like Wikipedia, I remember back in the day, Wikipedia was like the thing you weren't supposed to ever go to or use as an academic. But Wikipedia is actually built very well because it's informative. They don't have a lot of visuals, but most importantly, they give great direction on where you can go next. If you've ever noticed on Wikipedia, there's lots of little links, right, for particular words, so if you're looking up maybe the Civil War or something like that, they'll put in different cities or different battles or anything to, link you somewhere else. That is what we call direction, giving the user options to keep exploring within the website. So think about that as like the basics of what you would want for your own digital project in the humanities. Okay, so what we're going to do is look at 5 different websites, from simple to a little bit more complex. But more importantly, I want you to pay attention to how the information and the visuals and the direction are organized on these different pages. And what I want you to do is catch yourself to see if you're noticing patterns as to where things are, and also the range of what you can do in terms of presenting whatever topic you want in the humanities. Okay, let's take a look. So we're going to start with colonial Virginia portraits. And what I'm going to do is, we have this, very simple slide, but the next slide in every one of these examples would be a full page screen so you can see what the experience is for a regular person to go through this site. And I'm going to point out a few things as we're watching it, okay? So let's look at what the website looks like itself. Okay, so I'm going to use my little pointer here. Before I start, I do want to point out once again, you're looking for how information, then visuals, and then direction is situated on this particular website, okay? So I'm going to press play, and you'll see a pre-recorded mouse going through the site a little bit. I'm pointing out the top menu. We can scroll down and you see all the visuals. And then you see this bottom button, which is a great option for direction. There's more information and another way out to learn more. But we're going to focus on choosing one of these obvious paintings. So we're looking at this Lucy Park bird image. This website gives you the option to enlarge the portrait, while also giving you the option to read a little bit about the background of this thing. And most importantly, all of these little options give you direction to explore. We're going to choose one. So just choosing London, this is giving us the location via a map. So that's a different format, as well as more options, but families that were related to this. And then most importantly, more portraits that were either from or are still in London. So just this alone gives you an idea of a very simple website, right? You're looking at the information, you're looking at the visual simultaneously. Now, even though I said information is the most important, we'll get to why it is a little bit later. But as a user, as a regular person, most people are going to focus on the images first. So the fact that they did a great job showing you all these different images and these, they're very big and bold and colorful and making you want to choose, oh, which one looks the most interesting is great, right? It shows the person the range of what the site has to offer, in addition to what we have up here, which is the top menu. And that's like the basics of how you want a website. A good top menu to show your options, and then also your front page to show more options. And then once people choose visually, this is when they decide to read. Okay. So we're going to look at another website, um, a map format, which is becoming increasingly popular with the humanities in terms of producing digital projects. But I do want you to pay attention to the difference from what you just saw, which was a very basic, portrait gallery, image gallery type of website, to something like this. So let's look at a pre-recorded um, version of what this experience would look like. So once again, you see the mouse is going across the top menu to show you what this website includes. And what I want you to notice is, as we're going down, how often do you see information versus visuals? So a few things to note, obviously, is there's a lot more information. But one thing I do want to point out is this very interesting way in which you can kind of fast forward to certain parts based on the top menu. The top menu is not giving you different pages, it's just moving you faster down this single page of a website. We're going to fast forward to animations because this is actually the most important and most interesting part of the website. Without knowing anything, this particular website is supposed to be talking about um, emancipation for African American enslaved people, and what that might have looked like in terms of this large scale map here, in terms of the relationship with Union Army locations. So with that, I'm going to pause this real quick. So you could have gotten that information probably at the top, but remember, most people want to see things first before they read. Second, there was a lot of text. And as I said before, people don't like to read, and especially don't like to read that much text altogether. The third thing to bring up is people don't, or excuse me, if you're, depending on if you're using a desktop versus a phone, the desktop, it's already overwhelming the amount of text. Imagine if you had all that text shrunken in and you were actually looking at this on the phone. It would look like a dissertation before you actually got to the map. So something to consider is breaking up text with images. A rule of thumb for how much text you should have on a website, I always say between 3 to 5 sentences. 3 sentences, believe it or not, looks like a full paragraph as if you're writing, a regular report. And once again, you want to break things up visually so that people can have a miniature break, if you will. And the other thing I wanted to bring up is this part. Sometimes in websites, particularly in the humanities, they have things like this that are really interesting and tell you a lot of information, and particularly something that is, a pretty complicated history, right? You get a different perspective of what is happening and what was happening at the time. A lot of times this gets buried, as you see in this case. You have to wait up until this sixth category to get to this part. So if you have something that's visual and informative, don't wait until the end to, present it. Find different ways to present it in, the top, the middle, the bottom, and such and so forth. Okay. All right. So we looked at a website that was very simple. with just, a gallery of images. We looked at how to use mapping. 103 Orchard, the first thing I want to point out is it obvious what this is based on the title? So even though I mentioned constantly that the user is more interested in visuals first, Google actually is more interested in the information. So how would 103 Orchard make sense in any Google search? That's the first thing to ask. So the title may not have been the best title to use in this case, because if you're not living in New York, and particularly on the Lower East Side of New York, you wouldn't know what this means. Is this an address? Is it an important building? What is the context of this? I'll just tell you right now, the context of this is it was just a particular building in Lower Manhattan in New York that the Tenement Museum actually built a museum around. And this website is telling the stories of what was happening in this neighborhood, and particularly in this building, over various decades. So here's a little intro that they've put on their website to give you some of that. But like I said, if you were coming from Google, that might not be clear as to what is happening here. But by the time you get to the website, it is clear a little bit as to what the context is of this site. So I'm going to press play, and we're going to see how a person would navigate through this site. You X out of this. And one of the great things about this is everything is color-coded. A person gets to choose which decade they would like to focus on. In this case, we're going to focus on the 1950s. And I'm going to be quiet a little bit so that you can see and hear, in this case, what the experience would be for a person. So I'm going to stop right here and bring up the fact that we have a regular website, and then we have an interesting use of collections and various types of collections. You saw archival footage. You're looking at, archival, paper, paper, artifacts, records, and things like that are being used just to tell the single story about what it was like to live in the 50s on the Lower East Side. Just by the visuals alone, it's very clear it has something to do with a particular immigrant story, right? Then they have text, not a lot of text, as you can see, just to give you a little bit extra context as to what you could be looking at. We're going to continue to see more of what they've added to this to enrich this project.
So the American public was very hostile towards immigration of anybody. It didn't matter if they were Jews or not. The anti-immigrant sentiment that obviously has a long history, but certainly that's embodied in law in the 1920s, becomes even more harsh during the 1930s when, during the Depression. I mean, who wants, hundreds of thousands of immigrants when a third of the American population is unemployed? This carries over into the post-war period.
This is my apartment. I can't believe it. This is where you looked to see if a stranger, my parents always told me, always.
Okay, so Once again, this is a combination of so many different type of archival materials into one space. And the way they organized it, right, it breaks up between looking at things of the past and also connecting people with interviews from today. Even if you're talking about the participants of the people doing the interviews, right? So the fact that they're able to connect these two things is really fascinating and very well done. And like I said, what I love is here, this is always visible. So if ever you wanted to, this menu is always visible. If ever you wanted to see what the 1960s or the 70s look like, or even wanting to add your own story with your own object because you were inspired by this presentation, it's always visible. So that is a great way of using some sort of direction so that people know what to do after they've already experienced this. Okay, let's look at another example of how we can use technology to talk about these different stories. As you've already seen, some of the stories were pretty heavy. Some of the stories, talked about personal experiences, historical experiences. Some of them are just like, look at this collection. In this case, the title, the official title is Hanging Out Indigenous Youth in Quebec Talk About What Their Lives Are Like. This project is very much about working directly with people to tell their stories, but using a very interesting and viable technology so that you're getting not just your standard interview like you just saw in the past example, but you're getting a standard interview plus an interactive way to look at their environment as they're talking. So once again, let's look at the website to see how it's designed, how they get the user to even choose what to explore, and then you'll see an example.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Ademi Philly. Voici Kanyirsuyak, notre bel village. Puis je suis né ici, j'habite ici depuis que je suis né. Puis là, en avant de nous autres, ça c'est la baie de Kanyirsuyak. C'est pour ça qu'on le nomme Kanyirsuyak, parce que ça veut dire la grande baie. Fait que là, la baie vient de là-bas. Puis ça va jusqu'au fond là-bas, c'est une bonne vingtaine de kilomètres ici de notre village. Fait qu'ici en avant, là-bas, en arrière, où est-ce qu'on voit les montagnes, là, c'est là qu'il y a le coucher du soleil. Fait que là, on est printemps en ce moment. Fait que le coucher du soleil, c'est entre 9h et 10h. Fait que pendant l'été, le soleil se couche à 11h le soir. Fait que là...
Okay, to be clear, that hand that you saw moving, that would be from the user's perspective. They can move this video around as this man is talking about his life, his environment. They also have this side panel over here, so you can learn a little bit more. I mean, what a great experience, right? And yet it's very simple, but using technology in this very unique way. There's very little text, right? Aside from the side panel here. And yet you are still getting information about what is actually happening and what the whole point of the project is, which is to learn directly from, living Indigenous people. Okay, as you can see, they still have options ready to go as to where you can go after watching this. You can also go back. You saw all the different examples or all the different options to see similar interviews with the same option to do the 360 immersive. So there you go. That is another idea to choose. Okay, this one is a little bit more technically advanced. We're now moving into virtual tours. Virtual tours are starting to become a very popular option for a lot of institutions, particularly those who want to give you a preview of what their building looks like or what an exhibit looks like inside. This particular one is interesting because this is not necessarily about something inside of an institution. This is about a site that is actually very difficult to reach. And yet, right, there's information here that is pretty, cool to learn. And while you're learning this information, what they're doing is also showing you from different perspectives what this site looks like using using VR technology and also a like an audio guide as if you were on a tour in real life. So we're going to see the example of this. I'm not going to speak. I just want you to enjoy the experience.
Welcome to Shirk Ranch. We're in the western United States, in southern Oregon. This particular stretch is known as the Guano Valley. Shirk Ranch's isolation is a key part of its identity. To give you a sense of just how remote this spot is, consider this. To get here from Lakeview, the county seat, you'd have to drive 56 miles east on the state highway. So what was it about this place that appealed to David Shirk? He'd become familiar with the area during his years as a cattleman. Before we enter, it might be good to know a bit more about the Shirks. David grew up on a farm in Indiana. At 22, he left home to travel the country, working in Missouri, Idaho, and Colorado. This is the two-story main house. The horizontal pieces are weatherboard, and there's a metal roof that's replaced the original wood shingles. Historians date this building back to David Shirk's time, somewhere between 1883 to 1914. According to his memoirs, David Shirk didn't consider his ranch hands second-class citizens. They ate with him in the main house, and upstairs, in the large rectangular room, So
I'm going to pause there and go back. Oh, that's okay. But I'm going to pause there because I really want you to see all the different things that they're doing here. In addition to, this being a guided tour, right? They have these options down here. If I leave my mouse alone, you'll see them to, move between different sections of the tour. They also have these side panels here to show you images, maps in addition. So this is another thing of combining multiple formats to understand, whatever the topic is. And you have the option at the bottom to, volume, and if you want it in HD, if you want the captions or not, and so on and so forth. And what I paused is you can also, I didn't do a very good job at this, but it's okay. You can
installed a
also
billiard
move.
table so they'd have something to do during the long winter evenings. Have a look around, and as you do, imagine the scene back in Shirk's time, perhaps on one of those winter evenings. You might hear.
So that's what's interesting, right? It's giving the person the option to explore while they're absorbing the information. So the information is there, they're not reading it, but the fact that, it's being said while, because we're able to do that now, right? We're able to scroll and swipe and things and also hear stuff at the same time. It's really fascinating. Okay, so this one is probably one of my favorites. It's called the Witness Blanket. This particular project is very heavy subject matter. It is focusing on the or acknowledging the atrocities that came from Native American groups, especially in the late 1800s and early 1900s, that had to go through the residential school system to be less Native American. This is using the concept of an indigenous blanket, but digitizing it in a way where Instead of, the quilt being pieces of fabric, the quilt is actually different objects that people have donated or given, um, or to have photographed, that represent various memories, experiences of this, terrible time in history in both Canada and in the US. They both countries had the same type of system. So once again, I'm going to play the experience of going through there, and I am going to point out a few things before we move on. Everything that you see is highlighted is a particular object, and as we zoom in, you'll see even in the smallest of boxes, these are all specific objects. This is where the information comes in about this particular object, and also, any anecdotes that someone had about their experience related to this particular object. They're also using various formats to talk about the experience, photos, live or current interviews, quotes. And my favorite thing is the use of this red square that was over here. I'm going to pause this for a second. So the red square is over there. And if you go through the website, they kind of explain to you that there's this red thing to kind of be there if you need to take a break, especially because this topic is so sensitive for a lot of people, And as you see, once you click the red area, they have the option here to call a crisis hotline if you need emotional support. But then there's a second option down here that says, use the links below to resume your journey with the witness blanket or to exit. So I'm going to click to show you what happens if you click out. And then they have this beautiful thing called safe space. This is actually really interesting that they did this in a digital way. There is a similar environment at the Smithsonian, the African American Museum, the African American Smithsonian. Same thing, because some of the topics are so heavy, a person may need to take a break or, release emotions. And they also have a physical space, ironically, that also is related to water. And you can sit in it. There's nothing in it but this beautiful like fountain, very calming waters. And I think it's really interesting that they kind of took the same concept and did this in a digital space. And as you can see, you can continue watching this very calming video, leave the blanket, return, get support, which will take you back to that box that gave you the phone number and whatnot. But what a great way to, like I said, combine all the elements that we've been talking about in terms of information, in terms of visuals, and in terms of giving people direction. This is the most obvious way of giving people direction, but the fact that they created these other ways of giving people direction that are beyond just explore more. In this case, this direction is giving people the option to take a moment, which I think is so really, so beautiful. All right. So a few things that I want to talk about now that we've seen 5 different visual ways of doing websites, using topics in the humanities. The next thing to talk about is how to manage a website content. So I specifically want to talk about the technical term called information architecture. And as I mentioned earlier, in one of the first slides, the order for websites in terms of importance was information, visuals, and then direction. The reason why information is first for a website is because this is how Google search works. If you've ever been on Google, which we all have, right? Or actually, let me go back. If you ever wanted to know something, there's only maybe a handful of websites that you know by their www dot such and so forth.com address, right? It's very similar to phone numbers right now, right? We only know a handful of phone numbers because most of them are stored in our phone. And one of those is Google, right? So rarely will anyone enter your site, into your website, using your URL, your www dot whatever it is. Most people enter sites through Google search. The way Google search works is by looking at what people are typing in, what they call the keyword phrase, if you will. And it's usually either a question or kind of a random series of words, a statement of words, if you will. And then they show you results based on not websites, but web pages that answer the question. I'll repeat that again. You'll type in something. I'm going to do something very random, like, I want to learn about, or you wouldn't write that, but, let's go back to the Virginia portraits. Maybe you wanted to learn about a specific person. You'll put that person's name in, maybe a date range. And Google is looking for the best web pages, meaning they're not interested necessarily in the source. They're not interested in the website itself. They're interested in the web pages that answer the question of who is this person or what is this person or whatever. So this is why information is very important for a website. If you are building a website, you want to make sure that you are writing both in the title. This is why the 103 Orchard, might not work a little bit, in both the title and also in the text. Thinking about like, what general question would people ask, and how can I make sure that this is the page that gives them that answer? That's how you want to think about your website. Now, once they're in the website, this is when you can focus on the visuals and the experience and the directions and things like that. But most of the time, if you're building a website and you don't set it up where Google is aware of, how to categorize you in terms of, once again, what questions you can answer, then most people won't even know that your website exists. A lot of the websites that you just saw are probably in that boat, right? Archaeanalytics tends to find these things, but a lot of them in terms of, how are they being accessed in a regular day searches? Probably a lot of them are in the boat of they're probably not being accessed in regular day searches. So that's something to consider when you're building your own site, okay? The other thing, the other thing I wanted to bring up is the correct term for that Google operation is called Google Search Engine Optimization, SEO. That is the proper name for it. Information architecture is basically you organizing your information, but now first by, what kind of general questions can we answer? And then second by, as you saw in some of the examples, a lot of them did a great job, organizing the information once that person was in by using the menu options, by, using different chapter, what do you want to call them? Like prompts, chapter prompts as you're scrolling down. So these are the two things you want to think about: the questions you can answer to signal to Google, and then once that user is in, how are they going to also absorb the information that you want to present to them? But once again, without having to read a ton of stuff to understand what is happening. You want a nice mix of visuals and text. Okay, let's review. We're going to take a break. And obviously this is pre-recorded, so but I want you to take a break and think about, if you ever had any ideas for building some sort of website. I want you to kind of rethink what makes a good website. And as we just mentioned, it's the information to get people to the site, right? Because they're coming to Google. It's the visuals, right? And you saw a lot of different examples of how to use visuals, from very simple to a little bit more technically advanced, okay, we want to explain the experience of something. We want to explain the history of something. We want to explain the gravity of something. You've just seen various ways of doing that visually. And then obviously giving people the option to keep exploring. How to keep them on your website is super important. Those are the 3 points that make a good website. Let's move on. Okay. This is the second type of digital format we're going to focus on, social media. So what makes good social content? Now, some of you may be panicking. I know in the humanities, usually anything related to social media makes everybody sweat. They think they need 19-year-olds to do this for them, but you don't. And we're going to talk about the different ways in which you can produce social content without feeling like you have to do the most, okay? We're also going to talk about how to produce social content that is, in our favor in terms of we are more information heavy, but how to combine that. As you see, the order in which the order of topics that we focused on in the website section has switched a little bit. In this case, social media visuals are the most important, then information, and then direction. The direction we'll talk about, it's a little bit different. Obviously, you're not using website menus and buttons. It's a little bit different, but still. And we're going to talk about why visuals are important a little bit later. But first, I just want you to see the range of visuals that you can have. And I think that's what's really important because, like I said, you don't have to feel like you have to be in front of the camera wearing a ton of makeup or doing, weird dances for TikTok to do social content. All right. So let's look at a couple examples of social content in the humanities. Okay, we're going to start with the basics. Believe it or not, Facebook is still happening. It's slowly falling apart, but it's still happening. A lot of the different social media channels are still popular, sometimes by age groups or interest groups. And Facebook is still popular, believe it or not, particularly with older generations, particularly with Facebook groups. Those still do very well. And so don't think that Facebook is, on its way out or outdated. I will mention right now, I did not include Twitter/X in this presentation because the certainty of that is also on the line at this point in 2023. But Facebook and Twitter, theoretically, at this moment, have very similar formats. So whatever I say about Facebook, if you're still on Twitter or X, you can apply the same things. Okay, so I'm going to bring up again the order of importance. Visuals first, then information, and then direction. Okay, so why are visuals first? Well, because all social media channels have feeds that we scroll through. And what makes somebody stop scrolling? The visuals. It's a little bit different than the websites, because for websites, right, what makes us find websites? Google by what we type. So that's why information is first there. But because of the feed that we scroll through, the visual is actually the most important element than the information. So in this case, this is just a basic post of regular photos. There's no video on this, right? But they could have used a single photo and it still would have been interesting. But the fact that they use different, photos as a collage, if you will, is also visually stimulating and would probably make you want to know what's going on here, right? And this is where the second piece comes in, explaining what you're looking at. Now, the last piece, once again, is direction. Is there any direction for the user to, for instance, learn more about what they're seeing and reading? The answer is no. Usually you would see something at the bottom that says, click to learn more with a link. In this case, in this format, click to see more examples of our collections, or click to see more examples of this category of collections, or click to read more about this specific object. But because there is nothing there, then we would never continue out of this platform. And the whole point of social media is to move traffic out to your website. So this is very important. The direction part is very important. Now, even though I just said something very easy, which is just add a link to learn more about, something related to this. This is the only, this and currently Twitter X are the only formats in which it is easy to just add a link to this text. Everything else that I bring up later will be a little bit more complicated as to how to get a user out of the platform and onto your website. Okay, Instagram. So Instagram, if you can remember far back, was originally just images for a long time. So I've included an example of Instagram using the image format because it is still being used by institutions. Even though Instagram really doesn't want you to do that. They really want you to use video, whether it's in reels or stories, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But once again, the humanities are a little bit slow in terms of, moving along with the current trends, but images are still being used. And as you can see, these are 3 images under the same post. This is all the same post, but they're using the carousel option. That's what these 3 little dots are. And you can see this moves to the middle and that moves to the end. Oops. So that you're still interacting with the post just by swiping. But let's look. So we have the visuals. That looks interesting. We're reading. They immediately start talking about ceramics. But once again, where's the direction for the user to potentially learn more information or engage in another way outside of social media? There isn't one here. If there was, it would be somewhere at the bottom, perhaps, that would say, learn more about such and so forth, or about this particular topic, or to look at these particular objects, and then something about link in bio. So if you've ever seen the word link in bio, it means that the user has to click here on the channel's name, handle, go to their profile page, and that is the only place you can actually put an active link. Theoretically, there's another way, but an active link where someone can link out. A thing I do want to bring up is if that link in bio where you can click on it. Like say, for instance, you really wanted to see more of this, you really wanted to learn more of this, and you click the link, but the link then shows you a series of a list of links that you have to figure out, where do I find this? That, right, makes it difficult for the user to even continue their exploration. One of the things, this is also very common in the humanities, where they'll use something like a thing link. And I don't recommend doing that because obviously, right, we're a very visual science. So especially if you have something like this, if you look in the for-profit world, particularly with magazines, digital magazines or something like that, they'll have a software that if you click the link in the bio, they'll use the same image that you saw in the post so that it's easy for the user to say, yes, this is what I want to learn more about, right? So something to think about if you're, continuing to use the image only format. Okay, Instagram video. Now I put video here, but theoretically, Instagram has converted the original video format into Reels. And the difference between video and Reels is literally the size of the video. So in this case, you see this video is kind of squarish, whereas a reel would be the size and length of your phone. So that vertical format. That's the only difference between a regular video and a reel. But Instagram over the last 2 years has converted anything that used to be uploaded as a video into reel format. It'll just be a little wonky in terms of the size. But more importantly, this is another format to consider if you want to engage with people visually first and then get them to learn more about something. So I'm just going to play this so you can see. There's no sound to this. This particular institution used their 3D imagery that they have a lot of and turned it into something that was just a stationary video. But as you can see over here on the side, if you continue scrolling, I'm going to pause here, you'll see there is that direction. Want to explore more? Check out our online 3D artifact gallery and virtual museum. Now, the mistake here is none of these links work in this space, in the caption space. Remember, everything has to go through the link in bio that is only located if you click on the profile name and go to their profile page. But still, we'll take it, okay? And even if you had like a desktop and you saw this, there's no way for you to copy and paste this link out, especially even by phone. But that is just to show you another format to use. Okay, so Instagram stories and Instagram reels are practically the same thing in terms of they're both videos. And as you notice, they're both in this particular format in terms of the size, okay? So it's not square, it's that vertical format that would fit on a phone. The difference between stories and reels, I should have put Instagram stories / reels. The difference between reels and stories is reels specifically go into an Instagram like your grid, if you will, on your profile page, and stories go into the little circles that you find on top of Instagram. Stories are the only other way to link out to something. And theoretically, if this was a reel, which it is, you can post this reel into your profile, where you have the rest of your post in the grid. And you can also share this reel in your stories. So if there is some sort of, hey, if you like what you saw here, you can continue to this site and you can put the link in the stories. without having to go through a link in bio. So that's the other option for how to give the user the option to leave. Aside from that, the other thing I wanted to point out is who can actually produce digital content. So we just saw two examples. Both were very much about look at our collections, right? There was no person there holding them. It was just, your normal portrait photos. The second example was using a 3D model to talk about the collections. This is an example of a curator talking about the collections. So if you end up with a job where you end up doing either the social media or something like that, you don't have to feel like I'm the only one that has to produce this content. No, anyone in the museum theoretically can produce content. If you end up in the social media position, you're just the one that actually posts it and do all the other technical things. But anyone can produce content. And we're going to, from here on out, we're going to show various ways of how anyone literally can produce content. In this case, you can tell by his gloves, he's probably a conservator or a curator that is kind of used to probably talking to the public in real life. And in this case, he's just doing it in front of the camera. So let's watch how he's presenting this particular collection in Wyoming.
I want to show you a few awesome artifacts from video game history. Released in 1977, the Atari C380 was one of the first Ataris. It didn't have cartridges. It came with 4 games: Pong, Breakout, Pinball, and the later models like this one also had a basketball game. There were no controllers. Here are the buttons for your pinball. Here's how you serve your ball in basketball. And here is your knob for Pong. Later this year,
Okay, so that is just a, setup of camera, and he's talking and, doing the presentation as if he was talking to a group of people, which is perfect, right? That counts. The next thing we're going to see is an example of YouTube. So YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram, technically all, and theoretically Facebook, they all use the same long image format to do videos, but YouTube also still has their traditional long video format. Long video format to do traditional videos in that horizontal size, if you will. This is great, what I'm going to show you, because once again, it's another example of anyone can produce content. This particular person, 9 times out of 10, is an educator, and she is talking to a very specific audience. Let's watch.
History time, it's history time, learning stories from our past, it's history time.
Hi there, welcome to History Time. My name is Emma, and I work at the National Museum of American History. Here at the museum, we have lots of things that help us learn about the past. We call those things objects. Today, we're going to talk about an object that might be familiar to you, the bicycle. Let's take a look at some bicycle objects together. And remember, when we're learning about a new object at the museum, it's important to use our careful looking eyes. Here is a picture of our first object. What do you see in this picture? I see a bicycle with 2 wheels. I see a man wearing a fancy coat, a tie, and a hat, holding up a bicycle. I see a painted tree in the background. I also notice that there are no bright colors in the picture. I only see black, white, and brown. Did you see that too?
This is a great video, and there's so many layers to it. So obviously, she is probably an educator, and she's used to talking to younger audiences. So she is still presenting collections. She is still talking about history. And the fact that she used this particular image is really interesting because it is a Black man and in a context that we don't normally see when we talk about African Americans in the past, right? There's no references to slavery or oppression. It's just this man with a bike. And so just doing something like that is changing the perspective of history, right? That is probably not common, particularly for children in school. And then the second thing is, right, she is breaking down, this image in as if it was Sesame Street, right? And talking about connecting things of the past with things that they are aware of, in the present day. I mean, what a wonderful way of combining history and also, object lessons for children in the same video. So this and that, once again, that's another example of an educator most likely, creating content and in a very specific way and for a very, very specific audience. Okay, so we're back to this long vertical video format. Remember, I said Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok all technically use this format in different ways. Basically, because of TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook ended up having to adopt this format as well as their original ones. So if some of you are sitting here and you're like, oh my God, you just showed me a ton of videos of people in front of camera, but what if I don't want to do that? Like what if I'm not a great speaker or whatever? This one's for you. You don't have to do that. This is a great example of talking about something that's interesting, lots of visuals, but you don't need to be in front of the camera. You don't need to be speaking. This is an example of a method video, what we like to call like a method video. And all it is talking about a process, a behind the scenes process. And this is a very popular video, particularly for, museums, what I like to call upstairs, doing the science part, working with chemicals, working with equipment. This is perfect for those types of people. So we're going to watch this so you can see an example of how they're using the visuals, music, and also captions to explain what you're seeing. Okay, I just want to also point out that whatever you post here, because remember, it's all the same format size, you can post on TikTok, the same video. You can also post on Instagram because those are most likely 3 different audiences. So don't feel like you have to do all this different content per channel. This one video can be posted in 3 different places and no one will know it because it's very rare when one person in Instagram will follow you on on another platform. So yeah, please. Now we're going to get to TikTok. I'm sure everybody's really sweating right now because you're like, oh my God, do I have to do dances? Do I have to do weird stuff? So we're just going to knock this out. We're going to show you 3 different types of formats that you can use in TikTok. I'm going to start with the most obvious silly one. All right. If you've ever been on TikTok, it's, and you are, not of a young age, it's very loud and lots of things happening and lots of repetitive sounds and things like that. So this is an example of using all of, whatever is trending, how you can still use it to your favor as an institution. All right, so.
It makes me happy, but no, it's not an addiction. Is it an addiction? Is it an addiction? No, I don't think I think it's an addiction. I think it does put me, it makes me happy, but no, it's not an addiction. Is it an addiction? Is it an addiction? No, I don't think I think it's.
Okay, it forever, so I'm just gonna let you know. But, what did they, and like I said, this is probably a trend of everyone using this clip. So what did they do with it? They referenced it for their actual collections with a photo in the background. I mean, genius and simple, because guess what? You still don't have to be in front of the camera. So there's an option there. We're going to look at another one. So this is from American Artifacts blog, which is a platform that Archeanalytics moderates. The American Artifacts blog platform is very much about promoting the humanities using all these different digital formats that institutions use. And so we decided to use our TikTok to combine all these different formats, especially if institutions are talking about similar objects. In this case, it is literally just all images, video, stock video. It's a mix of things just to talk about this one particular topic.
What exactly is an adorno?
Oh, I did want to bring up, and you'll see the different institutions that are featured at the top. Okay.
Adornos were molded figurine added to Mississippian pottery. Some adornos functioned as handles or sprouts, but most were purely decorative. Adornos may have represented Florida's wildlife at the time. Here's a few examples of birds. Frogs, bears, and snakes.
So what's great about this is, once again, there's no person. And also you can use the text to speech option so that you also don't even have to narrate your own video. Easy, okay? And that was full of information. It was visual, it was fascinating, and fairly easy. Well, easy to do without being in front of the camera. There's a lot of editing there. All right. So the last thing I want to talk about with TikTok is, here's another example of, once again, anyone can make content. So if you work with, or you are yourself an interpreter, someone who dresses up, who, does like they're outdoors doing this is what it was like to live in the whatever century type of setup. This is another way to do content, right? The other thing I want to bring up about Not Your Mama's History is that she also works independently. So if you, have some thoughts about interesting things in history or interesting things in culture that you want to share, you do not have to wait to be associated with an institution. You can do this yourself and create your own channel and your own audience. The third thing I want to bring up about this particular video before we watch it is the way in which she talks about pretty interesting and yet serious topics, yet she's doing it in this very fun way, right? That would appeal to a TikTok audience. So let's watch and enjoy.
Welcome back to the Reproduction Ho Show, a show where my reproduction ho and I take a look at historical reproductions and artifacts related to sex, women's health, and birth through the centuries. Can you guess what this is? It's a merkin, or a pubic toupee, a wig for down there. These have been used for hundreds of years, and even to this day for many reasons. Documentation goes back to 15th century Europe, when one could acquire a merkin from a wig maker. In the past, they were made from horse hair, goat hair, or human top hair. The hair was cleaned and then sewn into lace, very similar to modern wigs. When it was ready to wear, it usually was a process of string and glue to put it into place. Now, why does one need a merkin, you may ask? Well, the majority of them were used by sex workers who shaved their pubes to prevent the spread of lice or to cover the fact that they had lost their pubic hair due to STDs or the treatment of STDs. Now, today, merkins are mainly used by actors who do work on period films and need them for accuracy or for modesty during nude scenes. Do you know of any cultures where merkins were common in the past or even today? Let me know about it. Well,
okay.
Welcome back.
Once again, that was a lot, right? She was funny. she talked about something that was interesting. She gave you pretty heavy history that was related to it. And then lastly, she gave direction, right? Even if the direction was interact with, this topic by talking in the comments or, whatever. That was a well done video. Obviously there was a little bit of production happening here, because she did have to dress up. Obviously she has great lighting, but you can see the range of options that you have. Okay. Okay, so how do you manage social content? As I mentioned before, producing content does not have to be this major thing. You can do one video and post it in different places. And something like a content management system is perfect for tracking that. A content management system is literally just keeping track of, the kind of content you have, where you've posted it, what you've posted, so that, and it kind of goes back to the information architecture, just being really clear on the topics, the range of topics that you can talk about, that would, with the goal of getting people to learn more on your site or wherever you're trying to take them to. But the best thing about a content management system is just by keeping track of the kind of content that you're posting, you can also repost it at later dates, because content, for the most part, especially if it's that kind of topical content, is what we call evergreen, meaning it never dies. It's never out of date. So be careful about doing content that is directly related to specific events. Like once you work in institutions, they tend to do that sometimes, like, oh, we're posting things, but it's, directly related to this exhibit, during this. Be careful about doing that. Do things that are just, here's a topic. We have a ton of, collections. We have a ton of things to talk about, right? And guess what? Not everyone is going to see that post at that time whenever you first post it. And not everyone who saw it in the first time is going to remember the second time you post it. Oftentimes you can do, let's just say, between, depending on how often you post, between a month or 2 or 3 months of original posts, and then repeat, you know? And I'm telling you, no one will notice. In fact, it might even do better the second time around in terms of engagement. So that's something to think about. The other thing to think about is, how do you measure social content? What you don't want to do is just post and walk away. You want to make sure that what you're posting is actually doing the job of moving traffic out of the platform, or at least like getting people to engage with your account, because that is kind of the big thing, in terms of how social media works in your favor. If the algorithms see that people are liking or commenting on stuff, then they'll make sure that your posts are being seen more often. If there is no activity on your post, then you need to question that and not just be like, whatever. You need to ask yourself and look at your analytics as to what may be going wrong. The easiest way to read social media analytics is to understand that analytics are showing you the order in which a person would engage with your account. So think about you as a regular person on Instagram or whatever, right? The first thing you do is scroll. The second thing you do is stop. A stop equals view in analytic terms, right? A view is you probably looked at the picture, maybe scanned the text. If there's something that you're like, oh, whatever, and you keep scrolling, then that's where the analytics will stop, right? Is you had views and nothing else. If the view ends up being a view plus a like or a comment, or a share, that's great. That means that you did something right in terms of combining the visuals and the information in the post. A share is the best of those three, because that means the post is being sent to other people who didn't know anything about your account. And that's kind of what you want to shoot for, or that's what you want to hope for. But the best option is they not only are stopping, they're reading, possibly commenting or liking, but most importantly, they've wanted to continue their experience out. So either using the link in bio option, which is usually on a profile page, or using the story option where you link out through stories. Because once again, the whole point for you is to get them out of the platform and onto your site for your own digital goals. Okay. Other channels I did want to bring up that you should consider. Pinterest in the humanities is kind of still being used. Sketchfab it's kind of like the 3D model space, similar to YouTube as a video space. It's even set up that way, similar setup like YouTube. It's the space for 3D models. It doesn't have the same traffic or relevancy, but a lot of institutions post their 3D models in Sketchfab. There's Discord to build community via conversations. You also have podcast. A lot of institutions are starting to do podcasts now to reach new audiences digitally. So there's all kinds of things, there's all kinds of other content that you can make. Blogs are still kind of a thing, but if they're built within the website, if you're using spaces like Substack or something like that, or Medium's still kind of going. What else? Anything that would require a subscription, like a paid subscription to a blog, those are in any software or platform that gets people to pay a few dollars for long writing pieces, is another way of producing digital content. So you have some options, even if you don't want to go the video route. Okay, review, taking a minor break here. So what makes good social media? Obviously, the visuals, and you have options, as I just said. You could still do simple images, but obviously the biggest things that attract people the most are video. You have options as to the kind of video you can do, long form video using the horizontal format like traditional YouTube, or the vertical format like Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube Shorts that use that. And as I just mentioned 5 seconds ago, there's other types of ways of reaching digital audiences, still through blogging, long form writing, but using subscription platforms. There's 3D models, there's Pinterest, there's all kinds of things that you can do. Now you've seen that you don't have to be in front of the camera. There's various ways of even doing video. So it should not be so overwhelming at this point. Okay, let's talk about the future. I'm excited. Let's talk about the future. So as I mentioned very early in the beginning of the video, the era that we are kind of currently in or about to be in is called Web 3.0. There's all kinds of complicated ways of explaining what Web 3.0 is, but just know that it's the evolution of what the web and how the web will function compared to what we are currently in or what we've been in the past 20 years, which is considered Web 2.0. And that's basically the internet plus social media and how that's impacted our culture. And Web 1.0 is before social media. So when the internet just came out in the mid 90s, to the early 2000s. Okay, so a couple things I want to bring up for Web 3.0 is the increase for more community engagement and the platforms that are doing that, NFTs, augmented reality, and the metaverse. All right, don't freak out though. Okay, so one of the things that you can do right now as we speak is to start thinking about, especially if you're working in an institution and you're in a position to think about different ways to engage the public, is to think about ways of engaging with audiences directly, meaning without social media. So that is like one of the major shifts that's happening. I don't know if social media is going to die, if someone's questioning that, but it's the way in which audiences want to interact with the source of something is changing. Before, right, if you as an institution, let's just say, wanted to reach audiences, you have to go through social media. This is what is currently happening, right? And you have to do all the tricks and stuff I just talked about to even make that social media space work in your favor. Now everything is starting to move towards how can we speak directly to our audiences. So a pretty obvious way would be something like an email, right? But audiences now really like spaces where they can have conversations, not only with the whoever the entity is, but with each other, right? That's what it's meant by community. And so looking for software, looking for platforms that connect these two, groups, or connect these two interests, together without having to go through the rigmarole of social media. Is kind of what's happening right now. So this is a very, very simple, we always start with simple. This is a very simple example of how to do that. This is a very, very famous bus that was abandoned in Alaska. And if you've ever watched Into the Wild, this is the bus that is featured in that movie. And the guy who's photographed in front of the bus, he eventually gets eaten by bear, but that's a whole nother story. But it was when it was in the wilderness, it was a very popular stop for a lot of people who took a similar trail, but did not get eaten by bears. All right, so this is called Bus 142, graffiti data crowdsourcing. So basically, if you can just see in this picture, there's a little bit of graffiti in different spaces, and they were trying to get people to see if they could, talk about, one, hey, did you add graffiti to this particular object when it was in the wilderness? And then tell us, a little bit about why or whatever, connected to that. And they used Google Photos, which is very, very simple. And so I'm going to show you an example of how they're using this, simple digital tool. So as you can see, they've labeled certain sections with numbers and letters. So you can then identify the section you may have added graffiti to, and then you scroll down to add things by section and number. And this is they kind of zero in on particular types of graffiti. And then you have the option to say, yes, this was me, and add any sort of commentary. Here's an example of someone who did. Okay. So once again, right, this is him talking directly to the institution using a very simple, Google Photos setup, right? They're not posting this as a social media post, and hopefully hoping to get comments. This is just a direct situation. So that is what things are currently moving towards. You can use Facebook groups, even though that's still theoretically using social media, but it's still this a little bit more direct conversation rather than having to deal with the algorithm or anything like that as if it was a regular post. Okay, so let's talk about NFTs. So NFTs, the simplest way of explaining them is they're just digital objects. And the technology behind NFT is you can track ownership. That's like, somebody in here is going to be like, there's more to it, but just know that. And the thing about NFTs is there's kind of two ways in which you can obtain them. You can buy them, which is what you're probably seeing in the news right now. You know, the market's up and down. You can also earn them. And so Search Inc. Took the concept of earning NFTs, because oftentimes the history of earning NFTs is either doing, you know, intense mathematical, games or things like that. So they decided to use the concept of, you know, an archaeological expedition kind of thing as a way of earning NFTs, which I think is pretty genius. And they've just released this platform. So we're just going to see, you know, they're still working on it a little bit, but we're just going to see what the website looks like and how a person can interact with it. And here's some, you know, basic information about what their ARX NFT is. And as you can see, they go into detail as to how to earn them, all kinds of different things. And I believe they do have a nice group that they're working with now who are very much interested in participating in something like this. So that is one very fun, interesting way of, right, getting people to learn about the humanities, right, through archaeology. And then there is incentive through this new technology that is all about earning tokens or other types of ownership. So we're going to talk about other types of ownership in this particular example. This is another project that I am a big fan of. It's called Ludi NFT. And basically, this is repatriation through technology. The British Museum, you know, obviously, like most colonial institutions, have collections that don't really belong to them, and yet they're very difficult. It's very difficult to convince these institutions to give things back to their original country, the original indigenous group. You know, and so two men have used LiDAR technology to capture objects in the British Museum and almost and create new models, new 3D models with them. And not only are they doing that, but now that you've changed the format, right, from something that was physical to now something that is digital, that means you can do whatever you want with this digital object. And they've decided to sell them as NFTs. So this is not a token or anything like that. This is an actual digital thing that any person can own. And we'll talk about like a little bit later as to what would someone do with this digital thing that they own. But for now, we're going to look at the experience of even getting there. They have a great website. And to access the page to buy their NFTs, you just click on that link. And there you go. You can buy them. This is an actual live page of how you would buy any of the statues that they have recreated using LiDAR to own them yourself. You can do that right now if you would like. And that Connect the Wallet is an example of how buying NFTs works, particularly when they are digital objects. The art world is very much is starting to cross over into this space. So this is not so far in the future. This is very much already happening. And it's only a matter of time that museums also move into the space of, how do we get people to interact with the things that are normally in storage, probably, and make them into things that they can own. We'll pause on that a little bit because the last example will show how all these topics, especially in the NFT space, could connect. But first, we're going to talk about augmented reality. So this is at Cahokia, and you're looking at the top photo, which is what Cahokia currently looks like. The bottom photo is what Cahokia used to look like thousands of years ago. And they're using AR, augmented reality, so that when people visit this site, which currently just looks like this flat field, they get a better sense of what the site used to look like in its heyday. And we're going to watch a video that shows you how that technology works. Okay, that's cool. So just by using your phone, or I don't know why you would bring a whole iPad, but okay, your whole iPad, you could interact with this site, right? Even though nothing is currently there, and still engage with something from the past and have a better appreciation of, this one sacred space, which is really genius to do. Also we know that, goggles could be involved, but this is very much, you're on site and you can still have that same, virtual experience. Okay, the last thing we're going to talk about is the combination of, how do you do AR, VR, and then the potential of what NFTs could be. If you have any nephew, sister, child that is, probably younger than 12 or 14, they're probably on Roblox, which is this virtual world. It's theoretically the metaverse. And all these things can happen in this metaverse. You can build your own worlds, you can interact with friends. So there's that sense of community that I brought up before. And the Met has come up with an idea to enter into the Roblox space by using some of the things that are already in their institution and making it available into these digital objects that can be used in the metaverse, in the Roblox metaverse. So the last video we're going to watch is an older woman who is testing out this technology. And what I like about this is you get to see, is there some sort of age gap between an older person trying to play with this technology versus, possibly a younger person who may or may not have an easier time with this. But okay, let's watch this.
The Metropolitan Museum of Art has been around for 153 years with the mission of bringing art to people and people to art. Of course, during the pandemic, it struggled to find ways to bring people to the art, but now that we're out and thriving again, it wants to bring a specific audience here to its halls. How would you get kids age 10 to say 13 or 15 to a museum with their parents without groaning and moaning? Well, the answer seems to be in the fiendishly trending app among kids that age, Roblox. The Met has teamed up with Verizon to launch a new app experience called Replica, which is available starting August 3rd. The members of the public can come to the museum, download the app, or do so in whichever order, and then start scanning actual artworks within the museum and convert them into digital replicas. You can keep them within the Replica app or transfer them into your Roblox account. If that's not going to bring the kids in, I don't know what will. 18 are available right now. 37 will be available for collection starting tomorrow morning. If you're in the New York City area, you can come through. We're going to bring out my inner child today to do this. Okay, we're going to do this. All right, let's go. Oh, God. So when you get to the Met, or even before, you can download the Replica app, either by scanning the QR code like I'm about to do here, or you can actually look up the app named Replica on your app store and download from there. So you could go through this. It's available on iOS and Android, which is nice. And then we'll start scanning things. Basically, when you're using the app, the closer you get to a discoverable object, there will be signs within it to tell you. So there'll be pulsating and indicators to tell you which direction you might want to head to. All right, so we found Henry over there just now. We're going to head over to these 3 or 4 that are probably right behind us. All right, so we're over here. I think this is the 3 that we saw on the map just now. Honestly, they're very close to each other. All right, this is look like the 3 I think they're supposed to be. What is going on? I think it's this guy. We're pulsing. It's kind of a scavenger hunt, but like tipsy. All right, we're gonna try to scan this. Oh, wrong thing. Completely wrong. Oh, is it this thing? Ooh. No, is it this thing? No.
Does it give us a clue?
It says try to find the right angle. Find the right angle like that. What? It's like one of those death masks. It looks like a Squidward.
Oh wait, that looks like a Spartan helmet.
Okay, so we're looking for a Spartan helmet right now. I don't see a Spartan helmet. Do you think your kids would like this? Is this a Spartan helmet? Did I find it? No. No. This is not the... Can I give up now? Do your kids have more tenacity than I do? Can we find something else? Let's find something else. Let's see if this is something else. Okay. Oh, it's a green looking thing. It's supposed to be green. That's the clue. This is green. Y'all, we're in one room and we're already lost. This was supposed to be the armor of Henry II. It's Henry VIII.
Armor of Henry VIII.
So we scanned the wrong thing, and that's why we're all off. So first of all, we got the first one wrong, but the app was like, nah, you got it right. Proving that AR is still a flawed technology.
All right, so I love that. It didn't work out. So yeah, I love the last line, which is, this is still very new, but you can see the combination of ideas when we're talking about Web3, between Ludi and what they're trying to do, between AR, Cahokia and what this is trying. I mean, everyone is trying to figure out what the options can be. And yet, right, you still have to work out the kinks of the technology. So I love that. I think that's great. So don't freak out about Web3. It is coming. It's practically here slowly, but how can you prepare for it? If you're in an institution, the first thing I put on here is priority. The institution itself has to consider anything digital, and specifically relating to digital audiences as a priority. And oftentimes most institutions prioritize audiences that come, or people that come inside the institution. So this is where, there's usually a lot of a rift, usually at the board level. First has to be a priority. If you are in a situation where they are considering digital spaces or digital audiences, the next thing is investment. Oftentimes, they will consider a grant, which is, a great way to start, but not the best thing to for maintaining something long term. So oftentimes the projects that we've seen in this entire presentation were probably paid for by grants. But remember, like, you have to pay for a website, every year. There's maintenance fees, there's updating things. So you want the investment to really be part of the operations and not necessarily one-off grants or a grant that is, over a long period of time. The third thing to bring up is staffing. So even if you have the priority to do something digital, you maybe got a pretty decent sized grant, you have to make sure that you have people on staff that can actually manage technical things. And oftentimes museums don't necessarily hire people who can specifically do, or have specific technical skill sets. So that is like a huge problem. And, there's also high turnover in museums. So maybe whoever started, had a particular skill set, but whoever replaced them, they're just writers. This is often what causes a lot of the projects that you've just seen to just kind of stop at certain points and just kind of get lost in space. And then the last thing, is you have to really, really, really be in tune with your digital audience and make sure that just because you built it doesn't mean it's right. Are people actually getting it? Are people using it? This is where analytics comes in, paying attention to comments and things like that, and making adjustments, because everything that you build will always kind of be a guess. You'll never know how people will actually end up using the things. Greatest example is that last video you just saw, right? Whoever designed the app and the prompts and things like that, I'm sure they thought this is perfect, but then you saw an actual person use it and they're like, this is not perfect. So, always be willing to go back to the drawing board and adjusting things. All right. A digital project is never done from the first shot ever. Okay. So what is the future of digital content? As you can see, it's all about it's all about community engagement. It's all about, interacting with spaces, whether you're there in person or not. It's all about considering new concepts of ownership, new concepts of, dealing with individual pieces or information. There's a lot to discover there, but it's nothing to be afraid of. In fact, it gives you more options to find new ways to talk about a variety of things. Okay, that's it. Thank you for sitting through this. Once again, if you're ever interested in learning more about archaeological analytics, we have our website. We're Archeo Analytics on all social media platforms. That's ARCHE, no A, and then O. If you visit our website, you'll see we have a lot of options for building your own digital project using our DIY websites. We have some low-cost workshops if there are specific technical skill sets that you want to hone in on. We also have free digital resources, as to how to, start digital fundraisers on social media or something like that. If you follow us on any of the platforms, we do a lot of the digital projects we love, which features a lot of the projects that you saw today on those social platforms, because we're very much about not only showcasing them, but seeing if we can also increase engagement with these things, and also, getting other people in the humanities to be inspired about what are the, what your options are for creating digital spaces. Okay, I guess that's it. So I'm gonna escape. Let's stop share. And yeah, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them into the comments. I will also add links to everything that, all the different sites that we feature today so that you can check them out yourself. And have a great day. Thank you.